The rain had been falling since dawn, drumming against tin roofs and turning narrow alleys into muddy streams. In a broken little shack on the city's edge, Maya wrung out a piece of cloth and draped it over a wooden chair to dry. She was only 20, yet her face bore the quiet determination of someone who had lived far beyond her years. Her younger brother, Arjun, sat cross-legged on the mat, his thin hands clutching his stomach. "Didi, are we going to eat today?" he asked softly. Maya swallowed the lump in her throat and forced a smile. "Yes, of course. Look what I brought." She opened a paper bag and pulled out half a loaf of bread, her wages from scrubbing dishes at the roadside cafe the day before. It wasn't much, but it was something. She carefully tore the bread into 2 uneven halves, sliding the larger piece toward her brother. "Eat, Arjun, you're still growing," she urged. He frowned. "But you worked all day. You should take more." Before she could reply, a noise startled them both. At the door stood an older man, drenched from the rain. His hair was matted, his clothes torn, his body trembling from cold and hunger. He looked as though life itself had abandoned him. I'm sorry," he stammered, lowering his gaze. "I haven't eaten in 2 days. Could you spare a bite?" For a moment, Maya froze. She barely had enough for her brother, none for herself. But when her eyes met the man's, she saw desperation, shame, and the weight of 100 unspoken stories. Her hands moved on their own. She pushed her share of bread into his hands. "Here," she said softly. "Please eat." The man's lips quivered as he accepted it. "Bless you, child. May goodness find you always." His voice broke as he took a bite, tears mingling with the rain still dripping from his hair. Arjun tugged at Maya's sleeve, whispering, "Didi, but now you won't eat." Maya brushed his worry aside with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "I'm not hungry, Arjun. Don't worry about me." What Maya didn't know was that across the road, inside a sleek black car, someone had been watching. The man in the back seat was Raghav Malhotra, CEO of one of the country's largest corporations. His name adorned glass towers and headlines, his wealth was vast, his power unquestioned. Yet behind his polished exterior lay a loneliness that no amount of money could cure. His parents were gone, his marriage had ended years ago, and his sprawling penthouse echoed with silence each night. That evening, he had asked his driver to take a longer route through the old neighborhood, a habit he had developed when the emptiness felt unbearable. He found strange comfort in watching lives so different from his own. When his eyes fell upon the dimly lit shack, he saw something that stirred him deeply. A young woman, thin and tired, offering away the only food she had to a stranger. She had nothing, and yet she gave everything. "Did you see that?" he asked quietly. The driver hesitated, unsure. "Yes, sir. Shall I drive on?" Raghav's gaze lingered on Maya. "No, not yet." That night, back in his high-rise apartment, Raghav sat alone at a table set for one. The meal before him was lavish, soups, bread, roasted meats, but it tasted of ash. His mind replayed the image of Maya smiling through her hunger, choosing kindness over survival. He realized that in all his years of success, he had never witnessed such simple, uncalculated generosity. The next morning, Maya rose before dawn, her stomach empty but her resolve unshaken. Today she had an interview for a janitor's job at a textile office. It wasn't glamorous, but it promised steady wages. She washed her only salwar kameez, pressed it with an old iron heated over coals, and braided her hair neatly. As she walked through the city, she passed glittering towers of glass and steel. She had always imagined what it might feel like to step inside one of them, to belong to a world that seemed made of light while hers was bound in shadows. She shook the thought away and kept walking. At the textile office, her heart sank when the receptionist told her the position had already been filled. She smiled politely, thanked them, and turned to leave, but her eyes burned with unshed tears. How would she tell Arjun? "Excuse me," a voice said behind her. She turned. A tall man stood there, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit. His presence was commanding, but his eyes were gentle. "You're Maya, aren't you?" he asked. She blinked in confusion. "Yes, but how do you know my name?" He smiled faintly. "Let's just say I saw you last night." Her face flushed with embarrassment. "You were watching." "Please, sir, it was nothing. Anyone would have done the same." "No," Raghav said quietly, "not anyone. In a world where people hoard more than they need, you gave away the little you had. That makes you extraordinary." Maya didn't know what to say. She lowered her gaze, clutching the hem of her dress. "I'm Raghav Malhotra," he continued. Her eyes widened. She had heard the name countless times, in newspapers, on television. To her, he belonged to a different universe entirely. I don't understand, she whispered. I want to make you an offer, he said, his voice calm but firm. Not out of pity, but because I saw in you something rare. Come work for me. I'll ensure your brother's education is taken care of, and you'll never have to worry about your next meal again. Maya's breath caught. His words felt unreal, like something out of the stories she told Arjun at night. Sir, I don't have any skills, she said faintly. I'm not educated. I've only ever washed dishes, cleaned floors. Raghav smiled. Skills can be taught, character cannot, and you have something far more valuable than a degree, you have a heart that puts others first. That's what I need in my company. That's what I need in my life. Tears pricked her eyes. She thought of Arjun, of nights spent hungry, of days spent begging for work. And here stood a man offering to change everything. But why me? She asked softly. Because in your kindness, he said, you reminded me of something I had forgotten, that humanity still exists. And I cannot walk away from that. For a long moment, Maya stood frozen, the rain pattering softly against the glass doors of the office behind them. Then, slowly, she nodded. That evening, for the first time in years, Maya and Arjun ate until they were full: rice, vegetables, lentils, warm chapati. Arjun looked up at her with wide eyes. Where did all this come from, Didi? Maya's lips trembled with joy as she stroked his hair. From kindness, Arjun. From kindness. Meanwhile, in his penthouse high above the city, Raghav looked out at the skyline. For the first time in years, the lights did not feel cold or distant. Somewhere in a small shack, a young woman had reminded him what it meant to be human. And so, a poor girl who had once shared her only meal discovered that generosity could change not just her day, but her entire destiny. She had given away bread, and in return, found hope, dignity, and the promise of a brighter future. Sometimes, the smallest acts of compassion ripple outward in ways no one can imagine. For Maya, it was a single piece of bread. For Raghav, it was the beginning of a life no longer defined by loneliness. And for Arjun, it was the doorway to dreams that once seemed impossible. The world outside remained vast and unforgiving, but within it, one moment of kindness had created a bridge between two lives, and perhaps, a future filled not only with opportunity, but with the warmth of family. The rain had turned the narrow lanes into rivers of mud. Puddles reflected flickering street lamps, and the smell of damp earth filled the air. In a small shack on the city's forgotten edge, Maya returned home after another long day of work. Her sandals were soaked, and her thin cotton dress clung to her shivering body. Inside, her younger brother Arjun sat cross-legged on a worn mat, waiting eagerly. His wide eyes lit up when she entered, but the hope quickly dimmed when he saw the small paper bag in her hand. This is all I could manage today, Maya said softly, pulling out half a loaf of bread and a small packet of lentils. Arjun's face fell, though he tried to hide it. It's enough, he said quickly, not wanting to add to her burden. She tore the bread in half and pushed the larger piece toward him. Eat, Arjun, you need strength. He shook his head. But you worked all day. Take more. Before she could argue, a weak cough sounded from the doorway. Both siblings turned. Standing in the rain was an old man, drenched and trembling. His clothes hung in tatters, his skin pale with hunger. I don't mean to intrude, the stranger whispered. But could you spare a little food? I haven't eaten in days. Maya froze. She had so little, barely enough for her brother. But when her eyes met the man's, she saw desperation and shame carved into his face. Something deep within her stirred, a compassion that overpowered her own hunger. She slid her portion of bread across the mat. Here, please take it. The man's hands shook as he accepted it. Bless you, child, he whispered, tears streaming down his face as he ate. Arjun tugged her sleeve. Didi, what about you? He asked in a whisper, his young voice trembling with worry. Maya forced a smile. I'll be fine, but her empty stomach ached in protest. What neither she nor Arjun noticed was the sleek black car parked across the road. Inside, behind tinted glass, sat Raghav Malhotra, CEO of one of the country's most powerful corporations. A man whose name was etched on skyscrapers, whose decisions shaped industries. And yet, in that moment, he was just a lonely soul watching a girl give away her last meal. Raghav had been restless that night, asking his driver to take a longer route through the older part of the city. He found himself strangely drawn to the rawness of lives so different from his own. But what he saw in that shack pierced through the walls he had built around his heart. A girl who had nothing, yet gave everything. "Shall I drive on, sir?" his driver asked quietly. Raghav shook his head, his eyes remained fixed on Maya. No, not yet. That night, back in his luxurious penthouse, he sat at a dining table groaning under platters of food. Yet every bite tasted empty. His thoughts returned to the dimly lit shack, to the girl with kind eyes who had chosen compassion over hunger. For the first time in years, Raghav Malhotra felt something stir in his heart, an ache not of loneliness, but of longing. Part 2. The stunning offer. The morning sun rose reluctantly, as if weighed down by the gloom of the city. Maya woke before dawn, washed her only salwar kameez, and pressed it carefully with an old coal iron. Today was important. She had a job interview for a cleaner's position at a textile office. The pay was modest, but it promised stability. "Will they hire you, Didi?" Arjun asked sleepily as he rubbed his eyes. Maya smiled, though uncertainty gnawed at her. "If not today, then another day. Don't worry, little one." She kissed his forehead and set out, her sandals splashing through puddles as she made her way toward the city center. The skyscrapers loomed like giants, their glass facades glittering in the morning light. She walked past them with awe, never imagining her life could cross paths with anyone who lived inside. When she reached the textile office, her heart sank. "I'm sorry," the receptionist said with a rehearsed smile. "The position has already been filled." Maya thanked her quietly and turned to leave, hiding the disappointment that threatened to spill as tears. But as she stepped outside, a voice stopped her. "Excuse me," the man said. She turned. A tall, well-dressed man stood before her, his tailored suit immaculate, his presence commanding. She recognized him instantly, Raghav Malhotra. Her breath caught. She had only ever seen him in newspapers, on television. What was a man like him doing here? "You're Maya, aren't you?" he asked gently. Her eyes widened. "Yes, but how do you know my name?" "I saw you last night," Raghav said simply. "The way you gave your food to that man. You moved me." Maya flushed with embarrassment. "It was nothing, sir. Anyone would have done the same." "No," he said firmly. "Not anyone. Most would have turned him away. But you didn't. That makes you extraordinary." Maya shifted uncomfortably, unsure what to say. "I want to make you an offer," Raghav continued. "Not out of charity, but because I see in you something rare. Come work for me. I'll ensure your brother's education is taken care of, and you'll never have to worry about your next meal again." Her heart pounded. The words seemed too unreal, too generous. "But sir, I don't have skills," she stammered. "I'm not educated like the people in your offices. I've only ever cleaned dishes and floors." Raghav's expression softened. "Skills can be taught, character cannot, and you have something far more valuable than a degree, a heart that puts others first. That's what I need in my company. That's what I need in my life." Tears filled her eyes. She thought of Arjun, of the nights they had gone hungry, of the dreams she had buried deep because they felt impossible. "But why me?" she whispered. "Because you reminded me of something I had forgotten," Raghav said quietly. "That humanity still exists, and I cannot walk away from that." That evening, Maya and Arjun ate until they were full: rice, lentils, vegetables, and warm chapati. Arjun looked at her with wide eyes. "Where did all this come from, Didi?" "From kindness, Arjun," Maya whispered, stroking his hair. "From kindness." Meanwhile, in his high-rise penthouse, Raghav stood by the window, looking out at the glittering city lights. For the first time in years, they did not feel cold. He thought of the girl who had given away her last piece of bread and realized she had given him something far greater, a reason to believe again. And so, a poor girl's act of compassion reshaped not only her destiny but also that of a man who had everything yet lacked the warmth of humanity. Sometimes, the smallest gestures ripple outward in ways no one can imagine. For Maya, it was a single piece of bread. For Raghav, it was the beginning of a life no longer defined by loneliness.